Okay,
Hello.
I need to pick your brain. Oh, do I need to pick your brain?
My brains are yours, madame.
Well, have you been following this nonsense in Spotsylvania with book burning?
No, I haven't. You had mentioned it in email, but I don't know this story.
Uh,
Or I should say, what again?
I wish
Okay.
to some extent it were that simple. Um, Background. So let's start there. Must have been about 10 days ago in Spotsylvania, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
The Board of Education, in a public meeting, two members of the board decided that not only was the board going to authorize going through every library in the city looking for anything that was sexually, LGBTQ, or quote critical race theory related, remove them from the shelves. Another member of the board said we need to see these books and then destroy them. A third member chimed in, I believe it was a third member chimed in with, we will burn them. The conversation then went on to basically book burning and ridding the community of this horrible stuff that our children should not see. I'm not going to get into what I think about if you can't parent your children enough to know what they're reading. That's a whole different issue. But the board was all in favor, as were an awful lot of people at the meeting, or at least that's what it sounded like, of book burning. It riled me up. Let's put that in one place. I was listening to bits and pieces of a Board of Education and teacher meeting talking about the books that are now to be in Texas public schools and libraries, and that teachers were obligated. Well, first of all, they were very restricted in what they could teach. But if, for instance, and this was the specific example, if they had to teach about the Holocaust, for every book they showed about the Holocaust, they had to have one of the opposing view. And the teacher's response was, so are we supposed to teach about the Holocaust didn't happen or something to that effect? Because that would be the opposing view, and that's where this little clip set out. Okay, and the rest of it is, Scholastics has been unfortunately burned in the past because they print a lot of the textbooks for Texas. And what Texas has requested in their history textbooks, and Scholastic has printed it, including a lot of Miss History, that finally they got called on the carpet for, and that was a couple of years ago, and this book thing has been building. All right, there's the background. I got a call this morning from an acquaintance of mine who had more than once heard my rants about book burning and what I thought of it. Because I think in one of either my public Facebook texts or one of the ones that's on the library webpage for YouTube, I said I wouldn't wipe my ass with Mein Kampf, but I wouldn't let you burn it either. And he said, are you going to make a public stance about this? You own a human sex library, and you are the person they are talking about. Yours are the books that they will be burning. The conversation for me, not for Michael, for me, got emotionally very quickly. Because a similar conversation 16 years ago now, in Atlanta, as a matter of fact, at Southeast Leatherfest, is the reason the library went from that thing that Vi did to a full-bore library. Because I had to talk to a young man to basically try to talk him out of closing his business because there had been a book burning in front of his New Age shop. That day, I had finished the conversation, went up to my hotel room, and had a screaming, crying tantrum. and swore that never again. Hence, it went from a workshop to a library. I posted the article from Spotsylvania on my Facebook page, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago. And I was actually surprised at how few hits it got. The few who did had the same reaction I did, which is, like Heinrich Heine said, they will start by burning books. Eventually, they must burn the writer and then the reader. And someone else chimed in with, reference to Nazi Germany, both of which I had agreed with. Part of me, Gloria, was very surprised at the lack of response. Then along comes this morning's call about, are you willing to take a public stand? The call got finished, and I found myself in the same shaking, crying, angry place that I was in 15, 16 years ago. My reaction surprised me. And then I began to wonder whether or not it was time to take a stand, a very public stand about a lot of things having to do with, I'm not even sure how to express this because I'm still having trouble with it. Those who don't remember history, the stupidity of burning a book because you don't like it, instead of either controlling your kids or teaching them to think enough to know what they're looking at. I'm sitting here still in the midst, as you can see, of that emotional reaction, debating how far into my mouth I'm either about to put my foot or, for once, trying to actually think in advance of the consequence of my actions. Pro or con, not the issue. But the last time I blew my stack, I ended up with 2 buildings, an extra workroom, and a whole lot of books that I am determined to save. Gloria, there are 1,000 questions going through my mind, including, am I overreacting? Am I sure of what my emotions are telling me without running it through my brain? I'm a mess right now.
Let me try to help, okay? First, you're not overreacting. It's a horrible, vicious, and mainly incredibly stupid and performative action. They don't have to, where did the Nazis did it. I mean, every government almost has made a show of destroying books. But it doesn't mean anything, and particularly not in today's world where those books, you just go to Amazon and get them. If any kid goes to Amazon Books, they're going to find books that were taken out of their libraries. You think they're reading out of boring libraries, today's generation? Probably not. So it's really performative. Do the parents even know what the content is? No. Talk about judging a book by its title. So to me, it's an act of the rage of the ignorant to demonstrate their rage and disapproval and to look, important to themselves and their clique. It's a method of aggression and intimidation. And so you're not overreacting to that. This is a crappy group of people doing something that is disgusting and immoral for a wide range of reasons. Now, the joking side of me wants to point out that they never burn the right books, like Mein Kampf or the Nat Turner diaries. You know, those, or the glorious biography of Robert E. Lee. All of that shit should not be
In school.
in school, where kids take it seriously. Okay? And think it's, do you know that, I mean, you're talking about the erasure of the Holocaust. They've erased the Civil War, or rather
Yes.
they have told a completely different story about the
Yes.
foundation of America, the truth about the Civil War and who really fought in it and what was, you know. And I mean, the kind of people who really fought, you know, on the Confederate side, you know, the wealthy and the ignorant, these people who are burning books, that's who went to fight.
Well,
They didn't know nothing. They
ignorant.
didn't know shit from Shinola.
Or worse, they did and manipulated those who didn't to
Correct.
go fight their battle for them.
Right. And it was not a glorious cause. It was an ugly, stupid, vile cause. So, you know, we live in worlds of contradiction because you have human beings who are really different kind of people, separate kind of people. And the divisions that we normally think of as the differences between us is not our ethnicity and not our race, but it might be our religious beliefs.
One down.
And it might be our loyalty, without our unquestioned loyalty to authorities.
Two down.
So, all of that said, in my life, as I've gone, you know, as I've become famous as a sex therapist and all that, it's been very hard, but I try to limit my battles to the things I believe in the most. Simply because every single day on Facebook, there's a dog about to be euthanized who I can't rescue. There's a child somewhere who's going for cancer surgery and wants my prayers, and I'm an atheist. What am I going to do? Send good vibes? You know, I mean, it's horrible. But all, you know, and then there's the way there's still fucking Native Americans and the way innocent young Black people are being killed. And then there's, you know, there's everything in the world going on. My God, we still have that fucking prison for children on the Mexican border. We have a concentration camp. So everything hurts. And so much about culture outrages me. But where can I do the most good? I don't want to be the person pointing out how bad the world is. I want to be a person who gives people hope to keep persevering, to keep living, to try and make change through their lives. Personal change, but whatever social change they can contribute to. And for you, my God, that's big. I mean, that is you. You are a person who's changed our world, right? So what's your mission? And what would be your mission in speaking out against book burning? I mean, I think the library as an entity could just post a banner saying we stand against all acts of terrorism against free speech, you know?
and intellectualism. Um,
And that would be a strong statement on behalf of the library, which is not in direct jeopardy from those people, but it is very much at risk from those people.
Yeah.
Or people like them. You know, when you consolidate the library and you have a physical structure that people can easily reach, you know, like down in Atlanta, is it going to be safe from nuts?
which is one of the reasons, like here, we are, as one therapist who finally found us said, you are the best kept, worst kept secret in Evansville. Most of the therapists who deal with LGBTQ and transgender youth know you're here and no one knows where you are. Hence,
It's a very rough, it's a very rough line to walk for you, I think. You know, I mean, I live in the woods by choice. I didn't want people finding me. Can you imagine? I mean, my neighbors don't know who I am, and I'd like it to stay out. I'm in a very conservative district, and, you know, I mean, so the point is, what benefit, how would it benefit your mission in life to fight that battle, or at least to make yourself visible on that front?
there 90-degree turn, I'm about to come back to it. There is a man in the area that is actually still Timbuktu. An article was done on him, I think about a year ago, and the fact that he had rescued over 10,000 scrolls and manuscripts from the great libraries around that area, and was squirreling them away in private homes so that ISIL, because I refuse to say ISIS, she's a favorite goddess of mine,
Right.
so that ISIL couldn't find them and destroy them. I vow myself making him a hero. But part, Glory, for me as a teacher is watching the long-term effect of this. I had just started teaching when New Jersey changed the structure of classes so that a teacher could no longer advance a student or regress a student. We were required to teach to the middle ground, not being able to take the student who is an intellectual giant and put them somewhere else so that they could grow. Nor were we allowed to give special education and special attention to that slow student, but we also couldn't fail them.
Right.
As a result, over the decades, because this is a long-term process, we have, forgive the way this comes out, we have dumbed down youth to the point where their test is yes or no or multiple choice, because we have stopped teaching over the decades the ability to critically think. I am not saying the book is bad or good. I am saying there are books on that shelf. Read all of them and then make your own decision. But being able to do that requires the ability to evaluate the information you are being given. If that information is taken away, 1 to 2 generations from now, there will be, should some great thinker, a new Plato, for instance, be able to gather enough of the children of this new Rome to teach them what it means to think for yourself, there isn't going to be shit to give them. Inside voice. And so I guess part of this obsessive crusade is not just about the book, but the ideologies that created this, the conversations that led up to this, the discussions that created whatever this may be on both sides, to have something to stimulate an idea that could go forward. In doing some research this weekend, and this is a long story made very short, about a woman that I'm coming to be more and more enamored of, a woman named Lillian Harman, whose father was considered the first feminist in the United States. I'm looking at some of the work that she did, but more importantly, I'm looking at the era that created this and going, what great thinkers there were. I don't agree with half of them, but oh my God, the discussions that must have happened and the literature that came out of it. Most of that literature has been destroyed. I'm lucky enough by absolute accident to be sitting on a lot of it. It showed up in a, I shouldn't say garage sale, in one of those storage unit sales. And as I'm sifting through it and realizing that I've gotten calls from writers, 4 writers, 2 in the United States and 2 in Europe, who are happily going, you know, I'll come here and go through that stuff because of the era that created it. Gloria, what happens if we lose it? And I'm not thinking about today, because you're right. Every power structure that comes in wants to destroy the evidence of what came before it.
It's true.
And maybe I'm being short-sighted, or maybe it's because I'm living through a series of eras that I can watch as I watch the dumbing down of 2 heading into 3 generations who are incapable of critical thought. And they're being taught not to think. They're being taught to obey and answer a yes or no, or true or false, based on what the power structure is saying it's true, not based on what you're thinking it's true, because you don't have the ability to think. Rant over.
I understand your concerns.
So what do I want to do in taking this stand? We had once joked about a haven for thinkers for good conversation. Maybe in making something like that visible, just like Spencer Brookstead used to do, posting the new articles. And maybe if enough of them get posted, somebody will start looking. Or having those 10-minute, because people can't digest much more, conversations about, hey, have you thought of? Or what do you think of? Or
I want you to remember that for every person who shows up for the book burning, there are hundreds of people in that community who are silently horrified but not going to do anything about it. And that's always been the hope for humanity. You know, just as you say, we're raising generations of kids who don't know anything and don't know how to critically think. Viola, we were raised that way.
I wasn't.
I was.
See, I wasn't. I was raised in
You were really
debate.
You were privileged in your home. You had these amazing, brilliant, wild, innovative relatives who were out there leading and, you know, speaking. And my dad worked in a sweatshop.
My mom, you know, was a
Neither of them finished high school.
Oh,
You know, so I mean, I just come from like a regular working class background, and I was exposed to a lot of things, but I didn't get polished until my 20s through education. We've talked about that. You know, it was education that changed me, but not education I got at home. And, you know, my parents were definitely more intellectual than most parents. They talked to me a lot about stuff. You know, what I met in were kids whose parents barely spoke to them, or when they spoke with them, it was to tell them to do stuff, or, you know, go to church and don't question and give your problems to the Lord. And, oh yeah, there's this thing in the Bible that makes no sense whatsoever. Don't you dare question it. You know, I mean, and there were things we were told as women that were all lies. And there was no evidence ever shown to me that women got pleasure out of sex. Not until I saw porn in my teens. And then I'm like, oh, well, good. I'm not the only one who likes it. You know? So it is the human condition.
Agreed.
And there will always be hateful people.
Also agreed.
So, I mean, I hated Trump so much. It was so hard to not become obsessed with that hatred and tweet it out 5 times a day and call him by insulting names, or jump on the bandwagon when the sex worker said he had a dick like a mushroom.
Whereas
it was so hard. I had to be my higher self, and I didn't want to.
See, I tweaked the bear. I probably got a few people thinking, and that's all I really wanted them to do. I went out. I have one of the red hats. Mine says, "Make Orwell fiction again."
I saw that.
And I wore it everywhere I went. And more times than not, I got the, forgive the way this comes out, the illiterate redneck who asked me, first person who ever asked me about it, asked me whether or not Orwell was a Trump fan. I want you to think about that. And I went, no,
right.
Orwell is a writer. Yeah, but is you're wearing a red hat about Orwell. Is Orwell a Trump fan? And it's like, oh, God.
Look, you know, lots of times when you sit and, like, when you watch a history show, obviously not on the History Channel, they don't do history anymore on the History Channel, but when you're watching like a history documentary, which unfortunately I'm dull enough to watch lots of, you know, you'll be sitting there and go, couldn't they see what was happening? Or couldn't they see how stupid that person was? And couldn't you just see what a complete psychotic that person was? Or Jim Jones. How could you take one look at him and not know? You know, but people do. And that's human history. And you know what else is human history? That we're getting old, you and me. And the things that we never thought we'd even live without are gone. Rotary phones.
Or going.
Milk delivery in glass bottles.
And some things I'm more than willing to toss by the wayside. Some things I'm not.
But other people aren't willing to toss those things by the wayside, and they carry anger with them. You are carrying anger.
Right now, yeah. Or right now I'm carrying, I think, anger, sorrow, disbelief, what the fuck.
So you're in grief.
Actually, I think I'm in the stages before grief.
Those are the stages of grief. Disbelief, denial.
And yet what I'm watching is that, well, of course, you can mourn for something that is not there. God knows I spent time in a grief clinic figuring that one out. But about those 100 people that are silent, that just watch in disbelief. The advantage of age is that I'm just too old to care about, to some extent, the consequence of my action. I have to be careful about the repercussions of my actions on others. But I'm at the, fuck it, I don't have anything to lose. Hi, here you go, it's in your face. A lot of you follow Grandmom for the lighthearted stuff. I'm going to, every once in a while, I'm going to give you something to think about. Now, whether you pass it over or not, there will be one or two who listen. Maybe out of that two, one will take a stand. That's
well,
what more than did.
If you know somebody who lives there and who's ballsy enough or activist enough, they could always stand up and say, I would like to add more books to the list, and then add a bunch of books that nobody in that crowd is going to approve of banning.
Yes.
And make a case for why these books. We should not be teaching the false history of America anymore, so these books need to go.
Because
and what's fair for one group is fair for
yes.
another group. I had a very, I live in this like rural conservative kind of community. The good thing is that there are a lot of hippies from Athens and libertarians who don't give a fuck what you do. So, but there is a conservative core. And they wanted to make a Christian club at the high school. Like a prayer club, and use the high school facilities. A bunch of Christians, obviously. And what changed their minds was that somebody told them that if they did that, if they could have special permission, they'd have to give it to a gay and lesbian group. And boy, did people change.
The Church of Satan, if you've been following some of the work they're doing.
Yeah, they're really funny.
Oh my God. That's what I mean about taking a stand.
Yeah, they're political. Well, they do political performance activism.
And when they
and it's the perfect antidote to their performance bullshit.
When they put the statue of Bahamut right next to the 10 Commandments at, was it somewhere in Missouri, I think? It was up for about 36 hours before the 10 Commandments came down, and they'd been on the courthouse lawn for decades. They said, we don't have a problem with it being there. We really don't. Here is our statue. Please put it right next to it. Because there was no complaint about the 10 Commandments being there. We think you have the right to put it there.
Right. And so I think, like an object lesson in good citizenry, making a cult group like that of whatever fringe they represent. I was going to say white supremacists, but this is anti-LGBT, but overlap is overlap. A group like that, they're really ignorant. They're not critical thinkers. Critical thinkers don't burn books. They think, I don't know if I like that book, but somewhere in there, there's a truth, and maybe someone needs to hear that particular truth.
And the truth is, here's the lesson we should never do again. And you destroy that, you destroy the lesson that goes with it.
When you make them aware that they actually live in a community with people who don't think like them, you see, they rely on people's silence. But it really needs to be the community that fights back against it.
And the community glory starts with one.
Yes. So if you can find somebody who would be willing to actually, not through aggression or violence, but simply by saying, you know, what's good, you know, this is a democratic country and we have X number of people who signed our petition, and we would like to see the following books.
So I guess what I'm trying to find is, once I get past this emotional reaction that I am more than happy to admit to, shake it off. And once my emotions stop, let my brain get into gear, because I'm a twin. The two of them don't operate well together. It's one or the other, until one of them goes, now sit, dear other half of brain, sit down and shut up. I have work to do. And then to find that avenue, whether it be maybe a once a week post, or following these articles up all around the United States. I've got to figure out something.
Find their local community newsletter or find them on Nextdoor, you know, and post there. I mean,
Which I do anyway.
one thing I really dislike is people who appear to be grandstanding on stuff. Like, they make a strong comment, but, you know, just their Twitter followers hear it, you know? So I think if you can affect change, absolutely. But what change do you make by speaking out about it? Except to, you know, feel a little better maybe about yourself. There, I spoke out. Or a group of close associates or friends, I don't know.
When
This is the Gloria Brame rule. When in doubt, say no and come back to it.
you're stuck with a story. More years ago now than I can remember, I was doing an event for Olga and Blue called Desire. And I was doing a workshop, literally leather history show and tell, down by the pool. And Midori comes rising beautifully out of the water, lecturing me about the fact that I had a book from 1881 way too near water, and why was I letting all of these people handle this book? It was going to get destroyed. And I told her I knew it was. And she looked at me like, you know, I had committed the great sin. And I said, hear me out. Before this book loses both its boards and its binding, it will be held by 1,000 people. Of the 1,000, 500 will be curious. Of the 500 who are curious, 250 are going to go looking for other books. Of the 250, 125 will be successful. So one book died to save 125 of its siblings. But it happened because somebody handed them 100, and at that point, 10-year-old book, and said, there aren't enough of these, and they're being destroyed, and maybe you could find them. If those, so that comes back to, if those continuing little niblets can make one person think, whether they agree with me or not is not the issue. Make one person think. For me, I think it was worth it. Now, if I can get one person to think every time I post something, maybe I can either rouse that community or create a new one. And
Or a new project under the aegis of the library.
Or with everyone. As we have expanded, and the annexes are growing, because now there are 7 of them. When people say, what do I do? Say, in no particular order. Share that knowledge with another young one coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Find space in your local bar or community center and build a small library there with the books you no longer need. Collect them from the community and put them all in one place. Our books are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Make them accessible to the next generation without them having to buy it,
Mm-hmm.
because there's cost to that. If you don't want to do that, you want something grander, come to the mothership and let's talk about building a library. Colorado is coming in next month.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about putting a Carter Johnson in Denver. But don't be afraid to save that knowledge in your own community where your youth can find it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think when this all got started that there would be, well, one, that it would be this size, and that there would be 7 others in different cities, and it's still growing. And it doesn't have to be under this library's banner. I
Right.
don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Just put it somewhere
Right.
where our kids can find it, where the next generation can read it, where everything that their public library can no longer house, they can see, because you can't formulate a question without basic information. That was Hillel's basic. A man isn't judged by the caliber of his answer. He's judged by the caliber of his question. But you have to
Mm-hmm.
know what you don't know to be able to ask it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that the book is available, even if it isn't in the library, unless somebody tells you?
Right.
So put that little library of 10 books or 20 books in your local coffee shop. Put it in your LGBTQ center.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, put it in your home and tell the kids they can come and get them there, although that's risky.
Right.
But for God's sake, save them and put them someplace where kids can access them. I was so proud of our local coffee shop because they have a bookshelf, but they let anyone, if they have the space, either put a book on the shelf or take it without any sort of question.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. But a couple of members of the youth of the trans community, and we have a fairly large trans youth community here,
Mm-hmm.
asked if people would bring to Penny Lane books on LGBTQ youth, storybooks that they could read. And the community outpouring was surprising. They ran out of space to put them up in
Wow.
because they were willing to just have a bookshelf.
Right.
If I can get one person to do that, this fight continues. If I can get 2, I just doubled my odds. 3, 4, or 5, taking 10 books and putting them somewhere where they're accessible has taken a log off that book burning fire. I'm just, like I said, I've got to get past the emotional reaction to think logically about this stand. And while I have advocated building libraries, maybe I need to get louder because they're being destroyed in other places.
Yes. Maybe.
It's just, Gloria, I was shocked at my own reaction. I'm still surprised. And I had that conversation at 9 o'clock this morning. That
It goes deep. Look, books are everything to you. You have you're a writer, you're a thinker, you are you're a historian. This is where your heart is. And so it's no surprise to me that, you've probably felt this way since you were a kid, that books are precious things.
You know what started this? 1971. It was a year after I graduated, and I went to Rider University in Trenton, so I was only 2 hours from home, close enough to do my laundry if I needed to. And my mother sent me an article that the Roselle Citizens Committee had burned books on the steps of the library. And the structure of that library, especially the outside, was a series of platforms that all the kids hung out on. And I remember coming home the weekend after she sent me the article, and I went to the library and I looked. And one of the places where we used to all sit outside and play our transistor radios still had the scorch marks from where the books had been burned. And I realized the place that had been my safe haven from the time I was old enough to ride a bike to the library wasn't safe for me anymore. It stuck.
It did. That's
Jesus
it.
Christ, 50 some odd years later. It's
Yes, honey.
So can't be going there. Got to stop people from going there. Even if I stop.
That's when the anger will go away.
Even if I can stop one.
Yeah.
So now I got to
Or birth yet another project.
Or birth yet another library. Jesus Christ.
Now, I want to tell you something that should make you even more pissed off. Most of us BDSM authors, we're censored everywhere. We're never even going to get, our problem is we're so marginalized, we're erased.
Can't be doing that. It's what the library is for.
Right. But that's the real danger your library carries. You're not just trans LGBTQ positive. You're about leather and leather history. And boy, are we marginalized.
And how that history
out of curricula, out of all curricula.
How it's into politics.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted.
You know how many people in politics are really doing it and would, rather see us all locked up.
I wanted
than admit that they're into it, which is, how the gay politicians act. Is like rather than risking coming out themselves, they want to hurt everybody who dares to demand equality.
Until they're caught on Grindr with the.
And then they write. Exactly. But what about BDSM writers?
Heinrich Heine.
We are totally fucked. We really are.
At least Heinrich Heine, at least 80 years before the rise of the Nazi Socialist Party, said anyone who will burn a book must ultimately burn its writer, because the book is not dangerous. The idea is.
I love your willingness to share that 1881 edition, because what matters are the ideas it contains in words. And this whole insane commercialization of editions for collectors, like everything else, has reached a point of absurdity in this world. So I would much rather have my books read 100 years from now with their broken spines and crinkled dog-eared pages than to think of it on the dusty shelf of some person with OCD.
Some would argue that I've got that too. But,
Or maybe, or if they have real OCD, it's probably nicely dusted, but still sitting on a shelf, never being read, vanishing into a collection of thousands of other books. Much better to have it passed along hand to hand, even if it's just down to one page. Here,
you know,
this is a really good page. Look at what she said.
the tail end of that story. When I finished it, Midori just looked at me, a little puzzled at first, smiled, and went right back down into the water. And
Is she a mermaid now? What the heck?
the event was taking place at
I love
a
her.
men's kind of camp and resort.
Mm-hmm.
And the class happened to be in the place that was second largest. It wasn't out in the quadrangle because they were doing a demo there. It was the area of this huge patio around the pool.
Oh.
And there were some people in the pool who had come to the edge so that they could listen. They couldn't have things handed to them, which is what the whole workshop was. It was essentially a show and tell.
Right.
And I would pass things out and tell stories about them in terms of how they related to my past, how I got them, what I got from them, and so on and so forth. And when things were fine until I got to the 1881, and up comes the mermaid. But I have found that as the original premise for the library was to bring history to the people it serves. Because museums are wonderful, don't get me wrong. But seeing it in a glass case isn't the same thing as being able to pick that case up, which I make people do. Now, pick it up, put it over there, pick up the book. And when they stop shaking and realize they've just had an encounter with something their great-great-great-great-grandparents were reading, and some of it is still really, really hot, that long line continues. But not everybody can come here. And God knows I can't get to everybody else. But if I can inspire enough people to do so, which in some ways has been what has been so exciting about watching the annexes grow. For every 20 who put their hand on a book, 5 will find one and start their own either small libraries or group libraries.
It's a beautiful thing.
Or like with Oakman and Oakman's Diamond down in Florida, their dungeon now has a Carter Johnson, so that everyone who comes in has a place where when they get overloaded, they can find that quiet place and calm down and read. I want 1,000 of them, 100,000 of them. I want to be able to go into Canada, and they're working on that actually, because proudly I've been banned in Canada. I'm very proud of that actually. I was banned in Canada in 1994.
Why? All right, but before you answer me, we have 5 minutes before you have to do a thing.
Back in the day, I wrote for Black Leather in Color.
Right.
Living in Leather 6, whichever Living in Leather it was being held in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped the Blicks at the border and wouldn't let them cross. Now, this was still in the days of the Sisterhood bookstore fight.
Yeah.
And Blick was banned in Canada. And because when we finally got across the border, minus the Black Leathers in Color, and word got out to Living in Leather that we couldn't bring them across to give them out, they made a banner for us that said banned in Canada. Now, much to my surprise, 6 or 7 years later, when I was going into wherever I was going into to do a a weekend with the local leather club, I got stopped at the border because I was one of those writers and I was on a list. They tore my weekender. I had a weekender, Glory, not a suitcase, a weekender. They tore the thing apart.
Oh my
And
God.
I was coming over there to work and spread propaganda. It took me almost 4 hours to get through Canadian customs because I was a band writer, which is something, by the way, I am very proud of.
Oh my God. So they're not so polite, eh?
Or at least they weren't then.
Jesus.
How many
Banned in
people can you
Canada.
say you know have been
Banned in Canada. I mean, banned in Cuba.
haven't tried that one yet?
But banned in Canada. All right. OMG, honey. Are you feeling less stress?
I am feeling less emotional.
Okay, good.
I'm
I'm good for that.
I'm still somewhat stressed, but now I'm almost to the point where I can make my intellect overcome my emotions and go, now you've got some thinking to do.
Yeah, all you have to do is answer the question is, what is my mission in this? And how do I achieve it? That's all.
And
She says easily, since she's not doing it.
I think it will be in speaking out enough to try to get people to create more libraries. I don't care how big or how small. That's not the issue.
I agree with you. I think would be wonderful.
To create those little safe havens.
I have lots of books.
Where the knowledge not only can the knowledge be found, but it can be discussed freely. Those little coffee houses, Oakman's Dungeon, to keep creating those spaces. Now I think more than ever.
Yeah. And this is a good time to work on that because clubs are going to probably be reopening by the end of 2022 for sure.
That's what I'm hoping. Put a reading space in it. Put a, put it in your local dungeon. Put it in your community center. For God's sakes, put it in one.
Unless the murder hornets get us all, I don't know.
Yeah, but
quite a run of strange years, wouldn't you say?
They're not paper wasps, so it may kill us, but the paper's still there. That's got to count for something. As long as one survives, the human brain will multiply. And who knows? Maybe we get stung by enough of them, we develop an immunity, and then we go eat, brains like the zombies do. I'm not sure what.
There, see? And you're toasting it. So life is not so bad. We'll get by as we always do. The strong survive. I was going to wear my t-shirt, which said Brooklyn, New York, only the strong survive.
True that. Although the Bronx might disagree with you.
I lived in Brooklyn and the Bronx and Queens.
A wuss.
Brooklyn was a lot tougher where I grew up. Yeah.
Although I happen to agree with you, oh Brooklynite, I know some people from the Bronx who might dispute that.
I guess it depends on the neighborhood. I lived in a kind of bougie neighborhood in the Bronx, and in Brooklyn, it was a lot realer. I had a job by then, but living with my parents, first place I grew up, it was a very odd neighborhood. You know who we feared? The mafia.
Well, doesn't everybody?
It wasn't like the street gang. There were little street gangs, but we didn't worry about them. What we worried about were the Italians. Old Brooklyn, man, old Brooklyn.
What do we still fear? The mafia and the IRS, which is its own form of mafia. Oh, I'm
just saying. you know, Dom was a lot more likely to knock you off than Jose in the day. It was a weird place to grow up. It was a great place to grow up.
Sounds like a bad version of West Side Story.
It was kind of that neighborhood. It was all, yeah. There were guys like that who hung out at candy stores.
Well, as much as we
Slick hair and we called them greasers. It wasn't like
still
grease.
do.
Yeah. But it wasn't like glamour boy grease. It was more like knife carrying guys.
Yeah.
Guys with knives.
And one of them also used to make a wicked egg cream, at least in my neighborhood in Jersey. The local candy store had the old-fashioned soda fountain. And a lot of the greasers hung out there, but one of them made an egg cream that was just wicked. Oh. I was too young to care, except for the fact that, oh boy, was that thing good. So once a week, I treat myself.
So I used to talk like I was from Brooklyn.
Oh.
I had that Brooklyn accent as a kid. I'm not doing it right now, but you'll coax it out of me. What do you mean? What do you want, Vi? I don't even know if I can really do it now, but yeah. I talked like that as a kid.
Cool.
Then my parents moved up a small notch to the next level of lower middle class. And all the kids like looked at me weird. So I learned to actually pronounce words instead of like connecting them all in a sentence. Which is
You do realize that probably tomorrow at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, suddenly I'm going to be thinking of you in a Brooklyn accent, and I'm going to burst out laughing for no reason at all. And anybody around me is going to go, "What's so funny?" And I'm not going to be able to explain it, which is actually okay. Gloria, we've got work to do.
We got work to do.
So here is where
There's always work to do for women.
Here's where I'm going to sign off. Wait until this thing records, because it'll probably take 5 or 6 minutes, and then send you a new link.
Oh, okay. Then I'm going to leave. Goodbye.